Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to talk about how to get the best footage from your HD goggles for YouTube. I've had a lot of comments, people saying I really like the way your footage looks. It looks a lot better than most of the HDZero footage that I've seen out there. I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but I'm going to share the way that I go about setting up my settings in the goggles, my settings for my video transmitter and my drone, and the way that I handle the footage whenever I bring it in to edit it, and what I do with all of that with color grading and all of that. And you can take bits and pieces of this, apply this to your stuff to make your footage. You don't have to necessarily do all these things, but if you do, you'll have pretty good results, I think. So you can take these things, apply them to your situation and use those, and hopefully this helps you get a little bit better footage out of your Goggle DVR for sharing. I've went the route of going with sharing just DVR footage here lately, and I think I'm going to kind of stick with that than using GoPro footage, which I'm actually recording on a GoPro here. So GoPro definitely has its place, and you can definitely get better footage with a GoPro than you can with your goggles. DVR, regardless of your platform, you'll definitely get better footage out of a GoPro than you will any of the others. That being said, it's not always the best solution for everyone. And for me, I've found that I've had more problems dealing with GoPro on my drone, mostly from a durability standpoint. Not so much of the GoPro, although that does happen, but with like mounts and with the GoPro deciding it doesn't want to record or stop recording or all those kind of things. So I kind of gave up on doing that and went the route of recording my footage once I switched to HDZero to using it. So hopefully you guys find this useful, and we're going to go out and we'll fly a little bit and get some footage to then go through and share with you and edit, and maybe have a little flight edit at the end. And hopefully you guys enjoy. I haven't done a flight edit in a long time, so we'll take some of the footage and put that in there. So that being said, let's talk about all the different pieces that we need to go through, and I'll have timestamps in the description. You can jump through and skip as much of this as you want to. I know I'll blather on and on sometimes. So first things, the lens on your camera, and I'm using the Runcam Micro V2 for my HDZero, which allows me to record 720p. I think they're going to have a 1080p at some point, but right now it's 720p. So I'm using the Runcam 5CL lens. It's for the Micro Eagle, but this is on the Micro V2 for the HDZero system. So the Runcam lens allows me to put this into 16:9 full, which gives me a nice full 16:9 aspect ratio video. And the reason that you want to go into 16:9 full, and you want to have a lens that can allow you to do that without having the barrel show up, or vignetting, however you want to describe it, show up, is you're going to get the most pixels, right? If you record in 4:3 and then stretch it, what happens is the goggles record in 720p, 1280, 720. So regardless of what you have your camera set on, that's the video format that you're going to get. So if you do 4:3, you are losing out all the pixels on the sides. Now you can stretch it, but you've basically reduced your resolution. It's like taking a smaller resolution image and then stretching it. You basically are just filling in those pixels with things that weren't there before, and you're just stretching it. You are losing resolution. So if you have an image that fills that 1280 by 720 image that you're getting back from the camera, then you are effectively getting more resolution, which is going to give you a much better image. And you can do the 4:3 and apply some of these other things to it, but you're not going to get the same quality of image. So you definitely want to have the HD 16:9 image with that. Now, there is some settings that you want to do. You've got your your lens. You've got it set at 16:9 full in the settings. The other couple of settings that you want to mess with, you want to adjust your contrast, and you want to adjust your sharpness. You want to lower those down, and then your saturation, probably lower is better. I think I have mine at 6. I'm not sure what the max is on that, but I have mine at 6. You might try a couple lower. You might set it to 5 or maybe 4. Lower saturation is better. You can always apply that later, but 6 looks pretty good when you're flying, you know, and you can always desaturate it later too. But your the contrast and the sharpness, you can't really undo those later. You can always apply some sharpness later, but you can't undo the sharpness later. And the lower contrast will help you get highlights and shadows much better, that you can always, you know, fix in post. You can always adjust those. If you have too much contrast to begin with, you can't undo that. You know, it's like your highlights get blown out, your shadows are too dark, and you really can't undo those. It's much better to have a lower contrast image, and then it's much better to have a little bit less sharpness too. You get those weird edges if you don't, because you're gonna have a lot of motion. If you have a still image, maybe a little more sharpness is good, but if you've got a fast moving image, less sharpness usually works out better. It's more pleasing to the eye. You know, that's my preference anyways. Take it for what it's worth. One other thing that you want to change, you want to turn the white balance from auto, you want to set it to manual. The reason that you want to do that is the auto white balance can do some weird things depending on your environment. So, you know, lighting changes, all that kind of stuff. You can get some weird stuff, and then it's really hard to correct that later. You can't really balance that later. And we're going to want to balance that color later, and it makes it much more difficult to get that balance right when the white balance settings are changing while you're flying. So you want to set that to manual. I've got mine set, the red and the blue, to like 220 and 205. Tweak those to your adjustment, you know, whatever you like. We're going to balance it later, so it's not too big of a deal. But the closer you can get to a warmer, less bluish image is better. You don't want to go too warm. You kind of want to get it as balanced as you can. But 220, 205 for the blue and the red there work well for me. That is all of the settings in the camera. The other thing that you want to do in your goggles, 2 things. Now, you can choose not to do these. That is your choice. But for me, you want to tell this thing to not record the OSD. Now, if you want the OSD in your footage, then by all means record the OSD. But if you want a much more enjoyable image to look at, OSD really doesn't add all that much. I mean, it's up to you. You know, you can record the OSD or not record the OSD. But I usually turn record OSD off. It's still going to be in your goggles. You're still going to see it. You're still going to get all the benefits while you're flying. But you're not going to impose all that extra information onto your audience who could probably care less about it. Now, if your video has something to do with showing the OSD, then by all means you want to record the OSD. But if you are wanting to record the footage to share for people to watch the footage and enjoy the footage later, you probably don't want the OSD. It's not useful. So that's setting 1. The other setting is you want to set this to record in TS versus MP4. TS is an MPEG stream format, and MP4 of course is MPEG 4. Both will give you good results. As far as the video goes, the benefit for the TS is if something happens that your goggles lose power or whatever, the stream will stop exactly whenever it loses power, but not beforehand. If you're doing MP4, it's got a little bit of a cache there, and so you're going to miss stuff possibly. It's much better to, and it can get corrupted very, very easily too. The TS won't get corrupted. If it stops recording because, you know, your goggles fall and the battery comes disconnected, or somebody pulls the battery, or whatever causes it to stop recording, you will not lose anything at all. You will only lose from the point you actually stopped recording, you know, not anything before that. So that's the other thing that you want to do. So those 2 settings in your goggles, those other settings in your camera, and we're going to go fly, and then we're going to go edit. Okay, before I delve into editing and handling all that, I kind of want to get a couple things out of the way with this. First, I'm on a Mac, and I'm using Final Cut Pro, and you don't have to do those things to get good results. You can get good results with a myriad of software. That just happens to be what I'm using. I don't use most of their software, so if you got questions about those, I'm probably not the person to ask. Probably Google or somebody else is the person to ask. But if you do have questions and you post them in there, I'll do my best to answer them. But if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. I do know that all of these things can apply to at least Premiere, probably other editing software as well, and other platforms as well. But that's not what I'm using, so I'm not going to get into those. I will mention one thing. One of the pieces of software that I use is called FFworks, and that's for pulling the video in and converting it and stuff. It's basically a wrapper for FFmpeg. So the stuff that I'm doing with FFworks you can do with FFmpeg. I don't know all the ins and outs of FFmpeg to do those things, but they can be done because FFworks is just a nice wrapper around it. I paid for FFworks. I like it. It definitely works very well. So if you're on a Mac, I definitely recommend giving it a try. But if you ain't got the funds, you definitely can do it with just FFmpeg by itself. I just don't know what all the command line parameters are for that. So there's that. Now let's get into this. Okay, so when you're using FFworks, you add the files. You can hit the little plus icon, select the file that you want to pull in. You can do one or more at a time, pull all of those in, and it's basically going to drop them all in this big list where you can process them. Now, when you do this for the first time, it pops up this option window. I don't have it on mine now, but pops up this option window where you can tell it to basically do things a certain way and then always do them that way or not do them. I've got mine set to kind of always do it a certain way. The options that I always choose for this are to pass through the video and pass through the audio. I don't want it to change anything. All I'm wanting to do is wrap the video in a different container so that my Mac will handle the video properly. And the container that I choose is the Move container. You can choose a variety of containers. I just like the Move container. It works really well. So that's the one that I choose. If you've pulled them in and the settings do not look correct, you can just select the video and the list there on the left, and then on the right hand side you can go over, drop down, you can change the video codec and the audio codec, and just make sure that you choose the pass-through option on those, and then you just click the start button, and then that'll process that particular video. Now, if you have more than one video and you want to make sure that you get all those videos together so it's a single file to make it easier in editing, and also for helping to get the color balanced correctly, you can merge those. To merge your video, you want to click the little merge icon at the top. It looks like a little link, and whenever you click that, it's going to pop up this other dialog. You want to make sure that you choose to not re-encode it, and then you want to change your format, and you want to choose the Move format, and then on the right hand side just make sure that you have the pass-through on the video and the pass-through on the audio selected, and then you're going to run it, and it's going to merge the videos, all of the videos that are in your list before you click the link icon. So if you pulled 3 videos in, it's going to merge all 3 of those videos into a single file in the order that they're in. So if you have a particular order that you want those in, make sure that you add those to FFworks in the order that you want them added, or that you want them in the video when it's merged at the end. So when you go through do all that, now you can do this 2 ways. You can tell it to keep the format. If you do that, then it's going to keep it in the MPEG stream, or you can tell it to change the format. In my particular case, I told it to change the format because I don't want to re-encode it a second time. Now, end result will be exactly the same because it's not re-encoding it. If you choose not to, you're not losing any quality if you do that. But I choose to have it go ahead and re-encode that with a Move container instead of a MPEG stream container, so that I don't have to do it a second time, and I just do it one time. So that's what I'm doing for the merging and the converting. and this will allow you to drop this into any editing program on the Mac. I use Final Cut, like I said before, and Final Cut will handle it just fine. So that's everything that you need to know about merging, pulling it in. Like I said before, you can use FFmpeg because this is all this is a wrapper for that. And if you do, I don't know how to do it, so I'll leave that to you to figure out. I'm sure there's some people who are a lot smarter who can explain how to do that. I think Bacon Ninja even had a video on doing that. If I can find it, I'll link to that down in the description below, and you guys can go check his video out because he does a really good job on that kind of stuff. So let's move on to balancing color and some tricks on getting your color balanced and what I do there. So to get your color balanced, the best way to do that is to have something white in your video. In this particular case, I have a fence back here that is white so that I can select that item and I know that it's white, and then whenever I balance, I just select that option there. I select that I want to do color balancing, and then I tell it that I want it to basically be manual color balancing, and I'm going to use this little eyedropper, and I'm going to select that particular item in my video, and then I know that the color will balance because this should be white and everything else should be the same. I've got my camera set so that it's not going to auto white balance, and then that will allow it to use this white in the editor to know that that's white, and it'll balance the rest of the video accordingly. Works really well. Now, you don't always have a fence, you don't always have a nice white cloud or something like that, or something else white in your video to do that. So the trick that I have found that works really well is to bring a little white index card and then just hold that up to the camera there in the front of it, and then you know at that point that you've got white, and then you can use that to balance your color, just like you do the little snap thing to sync audio. If you didn't know, you can use a snap to sync audio or a clap or something, and just like that, you're going to use that little white card held up in front of the camera to balance your color. Okay, so we have our video imported, converted. We've talked about doing balancing. Let's get our project set up with the settings that I use there, and then you go do your edit and do all your color grading, and then we export, and then we enjoy. So for the project settings, I set mine to 4K. I set it to 30 frames a second. Yeah, I record, I export in 30 frames a second. Now the DVR records in 60 frames a second, but I find that 30 frames per second results in a better video. I don't know what it is about 60 frames a second or the higher frame rate. It just looks weird to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think 30 frames a second looks way better. Even though I'm recording at a higher frame rate, I still like to export at 30 frames a second. So I make my project 30 frames a second, 4K. And even though I'm not recording in 4K, I use 4K because when you upload to YouTube, you get a much better bit rate on YouTube, and it turns out way better. So that's my settings for the project. For color grading, I like to use LUTs. In particular, I like to use Johnny FPV's LUTs that he created. He's got a bunch of different ones that he sells. He started this way back with Jake Irish, who was doing all of his color grading, editing, all that kind of stuff way back. And I purchased those, and I was really happy with the results. And I've since been able to get a few updates for free because I purchased the stuff originally. Anyways, he sells all those different ones on his site, and I've got all those different LUTs. But I typically end up using one, maybe two LUTs these days. He's got a whole tutorial on how to use all the different ones, but the ones that I like to use are the easy ones to use. They're like a quick one. And the one in particular that I really like is a neutral. It's basically one of his quick ones for GoPro neutral, and then I kind of dial it back a little bit, and then I'll tweak the exposure and the contrast curve just ever so slightly. I like to flatten it out just a little bit more, but I dial his back a little bit because it's usually a bit too strong for my liking, but it works well in a variety of cases. Anyways, so that's the ones that I use. I've got those linked on there. I don't get any money from it. I just really like those, and I think you guys will enjoy those as well. They are a little pricey, but you know, sometimes you get what you pay for. But you can also get, there's plenty of free LUTs out there, and you don't even have to use LUTs if you don't want to. You can do a lot of color grading just in the in your editor in and of itself, and you don't even really need to. I just kind of like the overall look on the neutral one. It doesn't really push the colors too much in any one way, or you know, give it like a certain feel or anything. It's just more kind of a very neutralized color, but it really makes the colors look good, and that's the ones that I like to use. So you can go check those out. Okay, so there's one more thing that I do sometimes to my videos. It's optional. I don't do it all the time, but I do it sometimes, and that is to apply a Superview effect. Now typically I would use this plugin to get this Superview effect when I had 4:3 footage, because it works really well for that. You take your 4:3 footage, you stretch it out, and then you apply the Superview effect, which basically brings the middle back in and leaves the other side stretched, which gives you that distinctive dynamic stretch, if you will. But you can apply that footage, you can apply that effect to 16:9 footage where we've got this fisheye, and it kind of gives it a slightly different warped look. I kind of like the way that it looks. When you're watching back the footage, it kind of almost makes it seem a little quicker in some respects. I just kind of like the dynamic aspect of it, the way that the drone, when you turn, the way that those come across whenever you apply this effect to it. So if you want that, I've got a link to it down in the description. It's Andy's Effects, and they've got a version of it for Premiere and for Final Cut and maybe some others. I'm not 100% sure about that, but anyways, those two for sure they've got it, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything, so, and it works really well. There's a couple different variations of it. I used the simple one because it just does exactly what I want, but it's got a couple more that allow you to do a lot more control and fine-tuning of it. So if you want that, down in the description. And the last thing we got is to export this, so let's go do that. For exporting, like I said earlier, I export at 4K. In Final Cut, it doesn't give you a lot of options on setting bitrate and doing all that kind of stuff. I know that you can really dial that stuff in with Premiere, and I'm sure there's plenty of other videos on doing that and getting good results for exporting 4K and getting a very good bitrate. But in Final Cut, the settings that I use on the format, when you drop that down, it's like it says audio and video there. If you look there, there's three sections. There's a mastering, there is a broadcast, and there is something for like web, computer, I believe is what it is. Anyway, so under the mastering one, I choose audio and video, and I choose H.264, which isn't the highest setting that you can do. You can do Apple ProRes, but it makes the files gargantuan, and I really don't want to do that. H.264 works pretty well for me. I end up getting, I think, typically like 65 megabits per second on the export on the bit rate, which is really well, pretty good. At least in my experience, it works pretty well. That's what I use for exporting. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Higher bit rate obviously will give you much better results, but the higher the bit rate, the larger the file is. So if you've got a program that lets you, boost that way up, then by all means you can boost that up as much as you want there. Just be aware that your file sizes will get much larger, and you may or may not get an extra benefit. There's a point where it's going to kind of level off. The extra bit rate's really not going to give you much because you've only got so much that you can work with. So, do what you will there, but that's what I use.
Yeah, you said it's a little late for apologies. Would never want me back, and now you're calling me. It's a little late, but who am I to say? Cause I would take you back, so what's it gonna be? Yeah, came back with that bouquet and apology note. Yeah, told me that it's too late, I should probably go. Yeah, drove home on that same road, same one that you take home the morning after you stay over. Hard to see it go. Yeah, what you mean it's over, why you walking out? Made a few mistakes, and no I'm sorry, let's just talk it out. All I know is days are getting darker when you're not around. 100 times apologizing, isn't that enough? But you said it's a little late for apologies, but never want me back, and now you're calling me. It's a little late, but who am I to say? Cause I would take you back, so what's it gonna be? Heard that you were hanging with another guy. Phone started ringing, heard your voice on the other side. Told me you were sorry that we ended things. Now you want me back so we could try a second thing. So you telling me that you spent time with another guy to see the grass on the other side was greener here, and you reappear in my life thinking I'd love to try. Wait, what about when I tried that? You tell me you ain't like that. Got a brand new guy, got sidetracked, heart got broken, and now you want mine back. Why you coming back the moment I decide to move on? Playing with my heart, you make it hard to know the truth, Don't know what to do, cause honestly I'm missing you. I haven't been the same since you went away. But I said, it's a little late for apologies. Didn't want me back, and now you're calling me. It's a little late for apologies, cause you were never there when you promised me. It's a little late for apologies. Didn't want me back, stop calling me. It's a little late for apologies, and now the tables turn, so I'm the one to leave.
Let's see, try to schedule. Hey guys, so man, the wind.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about how I go about taking my HDZero DVR footage and making it look the best that I possibly can for YouTube, for the flying videos and stuff that I do. So hopefully you learned something. If you did, you know, leave me a comment, give me a like, give me a subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and really enjoy all that stuff. You do not know how much trouble it was to get all the footage for this. Particularly today for the last of stuff, the wind is fierce. It's ridiculous. And then the flying for the past week, my flying has sucked. So I managed to eke out a couple of clips there that I think turned out okay. They're not my best, but they were pretty good, and it made for a pretty good flight, I think. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. And I will see you guys in the next video. We're going to talk a little bit about props and my thoughts on these HQ J37 props and my Gym Fan Vanny style props. So be on the lookout for that one. See you guys in the next one.